Hey everybody, this is Mr. Kowalchuk here. I'm recording in my office, so I've got my mask on. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing on the first lesson in Unit 2. So right here, we've got relationships between angle pairs for Unit 2, Lesson 1. Now when we think about relationships between angle pairs, pairs is going to tell us that we've got two angles, right? A pair refers to those two angles. And relationships means how those two angles work together with each other. Okay, so our first two standards for this lesson is going to be standard 5.1. I can identify complementary angles. That's going to be one of the big terms, and solve related problems. And 5.2 says I can identify supplementary angles. That's the second big term, and solve related problems as well. So for the opener, what I'm going to ask y'all to do is to take a look at it, pause the video, and see if you can answer these two sets of questions down here. Okay, hopefully you were able to have a go at those. When you consider angles 1 and 2, and I like to color code things, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, angles 1 and angles 2. So we have 1 and 2 here, and we got angle 1 right up here. What do you notice about those? What do you notice about those and how they compare to angles 3 and 4? Well, what I notice is that 40 plus 50 is going to equal 90 degrees, okay? And we know that this angle right here, that symbol stands for 90 degrees, okay? So those two angles right there make a 90-degree angle, and if we remember from our last unit, that 90-degree angle is called perpendicular. So these two rays here form a 90-degree angle, and they're perpendicular to each other, okay? So we've got over here that this is going to be a perpendicular pair, and then these two here add up to 90 degrees. So one pair is perpendicular. This symbol means perpendicular. And the second pair adds up. That's a U, adds up to 90 degrees. Okay. And then down here, same kind of thing. We have angle 1 and angle 2. And angle 1 is right here. All of that. And angle 2 is right down here. Okay. So what do I notice right off the bat? I notice here it's not a right angle, but it's a straight angle. And if you remember, this straight angle equals 180 degrees. So that's an important thing to remember. That's 180 right there. A little hard to see, sorry. 180 degrees. Okay, so angle 1, the measure of angle 1 plus the measure of angle 2, we know has to equal 180 degrees because that's a straight angle there. And then we see right here, we've got angle 3 and angle 4. Well, the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 4 equals 180 degrees because 40 plus 140 is 180 degrees. So these two sets of relationships, angles that add up to 90 and angles that add up to 180, are going to be what we talked about up here, complementary and supplementary angles. So I'll talk more about that in just a little bit. Okay. Now, our first term down here, adjacent angles. We've talked about adjacent in the past. That means next to. Adjacent means next to. So the definition of this are two angles that share a vertex and a side. So let's take a look up here. In this situation, angles 1 and 2 are going to be adjacent because they share a vertex here and a shared side right here. Up here, angles 3 and 4 are adjacent because they're right next to each other. They share a vertex and they share a side. Angles 1 and 2 are not adjacent to each other because they don't share any vertices or sides. Same thing down here with 3 and 4. They don't share any vertices or sides. So adjacent angles the diagram, I'm going to draw it like this. And the reason why I'm drawing it like this is that they don't have to add up to 90 or 180 adjacent angles. They just have to have a shared vertex and a shared side, okay? So don't think to yourself that they've got to be either supplementary or complementary, 90 or 180. You can just have a shared side and two angles here. I'll call this angle 1, and this one will be angle 2. So in this case, angles 1 and angles 2 are adjacent because they share a vertex and a side. Okay, let's move on to page 2. Okay. Non-adjacent angles. They have no shared vertex or shared sides. And those are the angles that kind of look like they're floating and not connected to each other. So this is angle 1, this is angle 2. They're not adjacent to each other. Now, complementary angles is what I mentioned earlier. Two angles, and they can be adjacent or non-adjacent, that add up to 90 degrees. So like that. So this is going to be the situation that we saw before, where here we have a 40-degree angle, and maybe over here we have a 50-degree angle. And those are going to add up to 90. So these two are complementary. We also can have complementary angles that are adjacent to each other and look like that. Okay. So this is one way that these are adjacent and these are non-adjacent. A complement is another angle that adds up to 90 degrees from, or I should say with, excuse me, with a first angle. So let's say our first angle is 25 degrees. The complement is going to be an angle that adds up to 90. So 25 plus what adds up to 90? Well, that's going to be 65 degrees. Okay, so this, in this case, this is going to be the complement. Now, supplementary angles are two angles that add up to 180 degrees. And we can have, again, non-adjacent and adjacent supplementary angles. So we've got our straight angle here at the bottom, and then we have angle 1 and angle 2, and we can tell because this is a straight angle altogether that it's going to add up to 180 degrees. We can also have non-adjacent, where let's say this is 130 degrees, and then this one is going to be, probably already guessed it, 50 degrees. So these two are supplementary, and angles 1 and angles 2 are supplementary also because they both add up to 180. A supplement, okay, again, is similar to a complement, a second angle that adds up to 180 degrees with a first angle. Okay. So again, here's supplement. If we have our first angle of 50 degrees, our supplement would be 130 degrees. Okay. Same kind of thing. If 1 is our first angle, 2 would be our supplement. Okay. All right, let's try some practice problems here. If you want to, you can pause the video and try these next 3 on your own. Okay. All right, now we have draw a pair of non-adjacent, not next to each other, complementary angles. So non-adjacent, not next to, and complementary means adds up to 90. Okay, so two angles that are not next to each other that add up to 90. And it says be sure to label your angles appropriately, which means I have to put the measurements in there. So let's go ahead and say that this one is 17 degrees. So 17 plus what is going to equal 90? Well, 3 more gets me to 20, and 70 from there gets me to 90. So then that's going to be 73 degrees. And this is just one example. You might have different ones. Okay. Now draw a pair of adjacent complementary angles. Adjacent, again, means next to, and complementary means adds to 90, right? So then we get angles that are going to look like this. And I'm going to make a real small one here and put my 90-degree symbol in there. This one I'm going to say is 5 degrees. And then how much more do we need to get to 90? 85 degrees. Okay. So we have adjacent complementary angles being the important ones. Now here, non-adjacent supplementary angles. Those are going to be a little different. Non-adjacent, we said, was not next to, but supplementary adds to 180. So that's gonna, let's do one here that's a little bit bigger than 90, and another one here that's a little smaller than 90. So here I will say 70 degrees. 70 plus what is going to get me to 180? Well, that's going to be 110. Non-adjacent, they're not touching, they don't share a vertex, and they don't have a side. And supplementary means they add up to 180. All right, let's go to page 3. We're almost done here. Okay, our last little bit. Draw a pair of adjacent supplementary angles. So adjacent again is next to, and supplementary is adds to 180. So that means they're going to be on a straight angle, and then one of them is going to be like this. Okay. Let's make this one 60 degrees, just so the numbers are simple. 60 plus what is going to add up to 180? That's going to be 120. All right, so we've got our adjacent. They share a vertex and a side, and they're supplementary because they add to 180. Our last term is linear pair. Okay. Now, linear pair is going to be exactly what we just drew. Adjacent, supplementary angles. And the diagram is exactly that. But we don't even have to label the diagram with values. We can just have something like this. We see that there's a straight angle here as 180, and we see that there's two angles, 1 and 2. So angles 1 and 2 create a linear pair. Linear, I think of linear and line, and pair meaning 1, 2 angles that comprise that line. Okay, go ahead and work on the whole class practice from pages 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, talk to you soon.